Quadrilaterals, Part 1. Your learning target today is I can reason with shapes and their attributes, and you'll know you're successful when you can identify quadrilaterals based on their attributes. So as a reminder, yesterday we learned about the parallelogram, the rhombus, and the rectangle. And just something I really want you to keep in mind, because today we're going to be focusing with the angles of the other quadrilaterals, is that the opposite angles are equal. Remember, if I have two obtuse angles and I have two acute on the parallelogram, that's what makes it a parallelogram. Two acute and two obtuse. And if I measured them, they would equal the same amount of degrees. This year, we don't have to worry about measuring them, but it's really important to know the type of angle. Okay, and then with a rhombus, we have opposite angles are equal again. I know that's not a rule on here, and that is something I'm going to add. The opposite angles are equal, just like with the parallelogram. That is the same rule. Remember, the only thing that made the rhombus different than the parallelogram is the fact that their sides are the same length for a rhombus and the opposite sides are the same for the parallelogram. But I have two obtuse again for the rhombus and two acute angles for the rhombus. Okay? Just like with the parallelogram. So that's kind of a rule with angles for parallelogram and rhombus. Now let's look at the rectangle. Remember, what made the rectangle different than all the other quadrilaterals that we did so far? That each angle is a right angle. So I have 4 right angles for a rectangle, and that's always going to be a fact. If I have a rectangle, every single one of them is going to have 4 right angles, no matter what. If it's up and down, if it's small, if that was a good rectangle. There we go, Miss Christensen. And it doesn't matter. All 4 angles are right. So let's look at 3 more quadrilaterals for today. So these are our new quadrilaterals for today. Remember, quad means 4. So that's why the word quadrilateral is really important to remember, because quad means 4, and that means all quadrilaterals have 4 sides and 4 angles. So just a reminder, because that is very important. All right, let's look at the first one. We have a square. And so let's just focus on the angles today, and then tomorrow let's look more at the parallel lines, or maybe not parallel, and we'll learn all about that tomorrow. So we have, for a square, all the squares have 4 angles, of course, and each angle is a right angle. That's a lot like a rectangle, remember? Each rectangle had a right angle also. So here's a right angle, there's a right angle, there's another one, and there's another one. 4 right angles makes a square. So how do I know the difference between a square and a rectangle? Well, that's when we would look at their sides, right? Because we know a rectangle has 2 sides are the same, and then the other 2 sides are the same, okay? Opposite sides. But with the square, all sides are the same length. So that's what makes them different. But they have the same rules with the angles. Next, we have a kite. And a kite is not like the rhombus like we saw. A rhombus kind of looked like it might have been like that diamond shape, but it's actually like a curved square. Or like it kind of looked like the parallelogram, except like a square. All the sides are equal. It's not like that. A kite it says exactly 2 pairs of consecutive sides that are equal. And that means these 2 sides are equal, and then the top 2, rather than the opposite, because we know that this would be the opposite of that one, and we know those are not the same. So let's see about the angles. I see one acute angle in our kite, and then I see a right angle at the top. Isn't that interesting? That would be a right angle. So I see one right angle. And then I can tell that this angle is the same as the opposite angle. So two angles are the same and they are obtuse because they are larger than that L or that right angle. So we have a lot going on that kite. And that's what makes a kite a lot different than the other quadrilaterals. Let's look at the last one, trapezoid. A trapezoid looks like half of a hexagon, doesn't it? Kind of reminds me of those pieces of those shapes that we sometimes play with when we're at school. And if I drew the other side, there we go. There's our hexagon. It's a half of a hexagon, which of course is called a trapezoid. Let's look at the angles with a trapezoid. These are going to be equal. So two angles are equal, or they're the same. And then the other two angles are equal or the same. So what are those angles? I see in purple two acute angles because those look like they are less than 90 degrees. But what about the angles that I had on the top in green? What angle would that be? Why don't we pause the video and you can discuss that with your class or someone at home. What are those two angles called? Those are two obtuse angles. Excellent job. I hope that's what you discussed because they are larger than 90 degrees. So that is a rule with trapezoids. Tomorrow we will go over quadrilaterals and we'll talk all about the sides and how if they're parallel or the word will be perpendicular. What will that mean? Stay tuned for tomorrow. So remember, your learning target today is I can reason with shapes and their attributes, and you know you're successful when you can identify quadrilaterals based on their attributes.